00025 The Hook, the impossible survival narrative. Visual extreme close-up of an emperor penguin's eye against a blizzard backdrop. Audio. Imagine willingly choosing to give birth in the most hostile environment on Earth. Negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 100-mile-per-hour winds, complete darkness for months. Most animals flee from Antarctica's winter, but emperor penguins, they march directly into it on purpose, to have babies. Scientists once called this behavior evolutionary suicide. But what they discovered instead was the most extreme parenting strategy in the animal kingdom. And it gets absolutely wild. 025-210 Segment 1. The March of Insanity, the Pilgrimage. Visual, aerial footage of thousands of penguins waddling across ice. Audio. Every year, as autumn arrives in Antarctica, something remarkable happens. Emperor penguins abandon the relatively mild coastal waters where they've been feeding and begin a journey that defies all logic. They march inland, across the frozen sea ice. Some colonies travel over 70 miles. 70 miles of trudging across one of the most unforgiving landscapes on the planet. And here's the kicker. They're walking toward the worst weather conditions imaginable. Why? Because they need stable ice that will last through the entire breeding season. The coastal ice breaks up too easily. So they head to the permanent ice shelves, the ancient frozen platforms that have been solid for thousands of years. But getting there is just the beginning of their ordeal. These birds waddle at about 1 mile per hour. Think about that. A journey that could take them 3 to 4 days of continuous walking. They can't run, they just waddle, one awkward step at a time, across a barren wasteland where temperatures are already plummeting and the sun is beginning its long goodbye. And they're not doing this alone. Thousands of penguins, sometimes tens of thousands, all heading to the same breeding grounds their ancestors have used for generations. It's like the world's slowest, coldest marathon, except there's no finish line celebration, just the promise of months of suffering ahead. But here's what makes this truly mind-blowing. They're doing this on empty stomachs. Well, not completely empty, but they're about to enter a fasting period that would kill most animals. The males, especially, are about to endure one of the longest fasts of any animal on Earth. We're talking months without a single meal, while standing in conditions that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. The march itself is a spectacle of determination. When the terrain gets too difficult, they don't turn back. They improvise. They'll toboggan on their bellies, using their flippers and feet to propel themselves across the ice. It's faster than waddling and conserves energy. These birds have evolved every possible adaptation to make this insane journey survivable. 210-425 Segment 2. The Courtship in Chaos, the Romance. Visual, penguins performing elaborate calls and movements. Audio. Once they reach the breeding grounds, you might think they'd rest. Nope. Now comes the dating game in a blizzard in the dark, with thousands of identical-looking penguins all trying to do the same thing. Emperor penguins are largely monogamous, at least for a season, and many pairs reunite year after year. But here's the problem. Imagine trying to find your partner in a crowd of 10,000 penguins, in near-total darkness. In a screaming windstorm, with everyone wearing the exact same tuxedo. They do it with sound. Each emperor penguin has a unique call, a vocal signature that their mate can recognize. The returning penguins will stand in the colony and trumpet their distinctive call, hoping their partner from last year will hear them and respond. It's like the world's most chaotic game of Marco Polo. When they find each other, the reunion is genuinely touching. They'll stand face to face, bowing, calling in synchronized duets. It's their way of strengthening the pair bond before the real challenge begins, because what comes next requires absolute cooperation. For new pairs, the courtship is more elaborate. Males will perform displays, standing tall, inflating their chests and producing calls that echo across the ice. Females are choosy. They're looking for a mate who can prove he's strong enough to survive what's coming, because if he can't, their chick won't survive either. Once paired, the romance is brief. They have a limited window. The female needs to lay her egg before the worst of winter arrives, and the male needs to be ready to take over immediately. There's no time for extended honeymoons. The mating itself happens quickly, and then the female's body begins the remarkable process of creating an egg. In just a few weeks, she'll produce a single egg that weighs about a pound. That might not sound impressive until you consider that she's doing this while her own body is starving, while temperatures are dropping to levels that would freeze exposed flesh in seconds. The egg represents an enormous investment. It contains all the nutrients a developing chick will need for the first stage of life. The shell is unusually thick, designed to insulate the embryo from the cold. Everything about it is engineered for survival in the most extreme conditions. And here's where the emperor penguin's strategy becomes truly extraordinary. The female doesn't keep the egg, She can't. She's been fasting for weeks, living off her fat reserves, and if she doesn't get back to the ocean to feed soon, she'll die. So she does something that seems almost cruel. She transfers the egg to the male and leaves. This transfer is the most critical moment in the entire breeding cycle. The egg cannot touch the ice, not even for a second. At -40 degrees or colder, the embryo inside would freeze and die almost instantly. So the female carefully rolls the egg onto the male's feet, and he immediately covers it with a warm fold of skin called a brood pouch. The whole transfer takes just seconds, but it requires perfect coordination. If the egg rolls away, if it touches the ice, months of effort are wasted. The pressure is immense. And once the male has secured the egg, the female turns around and begins the long journey back to the ocean. She doesn't look back. She can't afford to. She's starving, and she has her own survival to worry about now. 425-7-15, Segment 3. The Father's Vigil, the Ultimate Sacrifice. Visual, tight shot of a male penguin with egg on feet, surrounded by blizzard conditions. Audio, now we arrive at what might be the most hardcore display of fatherhood in the entire animal kingdom. The male emperor penguin is about to endure something that sounds like a nightmare designed by evolution itself. He stands there, on the ice, in complete darkness, in temperatures that regularly drop to -70 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chills that can reach -130 degrees, for 60 to 70 days without eating a single thing while balancing a fragile egg on his feet. Let that sink in. 2 months, no food, in the worst weather on Earth, while pregnant essentially. This isn't just fasting. This is a test of biological endurance that pushes the absolute limits of what a warm-blooded animal can survive. The males don't do this alone, though. They can't. Isolated, they'd freeze to death in hours. So they huddle, thousands of males, all incubating eggs, packed together in a massive formation called a torchu, named after the ancient Roman military formation. They stand shoulder to shoulder, sometimes 10 or 15 birds deep, creating a collective fortress against the wind. And here's the beautiful part. The huddle rotates. The penguins on the outside, taking the brunt of the wind, slowly shuffle toward the center where it's warmer. The birds in the warm center gradually work their way to the edges. It's a continuous, slow-motion rotation that ensures no bird stays exposed to the worst conditions for too long. Every male gets a turn in the warm center. Every male takes his turn facing the storm. Inside the huddle, temperatures can reach a relatively balmy 50 degrees Fahrenheit. On the outside, -70 with screaming winds. The difference between the center and the edge is literally the difference between survival and death. This cooperation isn't just nice. It's absolutely essential. But coordinating this with an egg balanced on your feet, while shuffling in tiny increments, it requires a level of careful movement that's almost miraculous. One wrong step, one stumble, and the egg hits the ice. Game over. The males stand there, swaying gently, making tiny adjustments. They're burning through their fat reserves at an alarming rate. They can lose up to half their body weight during this vigil. Their muscles waste away. Their organs shrink. Their bodies consume themselves to keep the egg warm. And they can't even distract themselves. There's nothing to do, nothing to see, just darkness, cold, and the constant howling of the wind. It's sensory deprivation combined with extreme physical stress. For weeks, some males don't make it. They run out of fat reserves before the chick hatches. They die standing up, frozen in place, still trying to protect the egg. It's both tragic and testament to the power of evolutionary programming. These birds are literally willing to die for an offspring that hasn't even hatched yet. Meanwhile, the females are at sea, feeding voraciously. They're diving deep, sometimes over 500 meters down, hunting for fish and krill and squid. They're rebuilding their bodies, replenishing the fat they lost producing the egg. But they're also on a strict timeline. They need to return before the chicks hatch, or those chicks will starve. Back on the ice, after about 65 days, the eggs begin to hatch. The chicks break through the shell using a special egg tooth, emerging into a world of darkness and cold. They're tiny, helpless, covered in gray down, and they're immediately hungry. This is where the male performs one final miracle. Even though he hasn't eaten in over 2 months, his body produces a substance called crop milk. It's not true milk like mammals produce, but a protein-rich secretion from his esophagus. He can feed the chick this emergency ration for a few days, buying time until the female returns. But if she doesn't return soon, he faces an impossible choice. He's starving to death. His body has nothing left to give. Some males, driven by desperation, will eventually abandon the chick and head to the ocean to save themselves. It's heartbreaking, but it's survival. A dead father helps no one. Most females do return, though. They navigate back across the ice, often traveling that same 70-mile journey, guided by memory and instinct. When they reach the colony, they face the same problem as before, finding their mate and chick among thousands of identical birds. Again, they use sound. The female trumpets her unique call. The male, hearing his mate's voice, responds. They find each other in the chaos, and the reunion is immediate. The female regurgitates food for the chick, taking over feeding duties. The male, finally released from his duty, transfers the chick to the female's feet and begins his own desperate journey to the ocean. He's lost nearly half his body weight. He's weak. He waddles slowly, conserving every ounce of remaining energy. When he finally reaches the water and catches his first fish in over 100 days, it must feel like the greatest meal ever consumed. He'll spend weeks at sea, feeding, recovering, rebuilding his body for the next cycle. 7:59:45, Segment 4. The Childhood Gauntlet, Survival of the Fittest. Visual, chicks huddled together in a creche. Audio. You might think that once both parents are available to feed the chick, the hard part is over. You would be wrong. The chick's survival journey is just beginning, and the odds are not in its favor. For the first few weeks, the chick stays on one parent's feet while the other is at sea feeding. The parents take turns, tag-teaming the childcare duties. Each trip to the ocean and back can take weeks. Chick waits, growing slowly, dependent entirely on the regurgitated fish its parents bring back. As the chick grows and develops better insulation, it becomes too large to stay on its parents' feet all the time. This is when the chicks form creches, large groups of young penguins that huddle together for warmth while both parents are away hunting. It's like a penguin daycare, except there are no adults supervising. The creche is both protection and vulnerability. Together, the chicks can stay warmer. But they're also exposed to predators. Giant petrels, large seabirds with a taste for penguin chicks, patrol the colonies. They're looking for weak, isolated, or unguarded chicks. A chick that wanders from the creche is in serious danger. The parents, when they return from feeding trips, must find their specific chick in the creche. Once again, they use vocalizations. Each chick has learned its parents' calls, and the parents know their chick's voice. They'll stand at the edge of the creche calling until their chick responds and waddles over. But here's a dark reality. Not all chicks get fed equally. If food is scarce, if the parents are having trouble finding fish, they might not bring back enough. Some chicks starve. Some parents, facing their own survival crisis, abandon their chicks. The colony becomes a place of both cooperation and quiet tragedy. The chicks are growing their adult feathers now, losing the fluffy gray down that kept them warm as babies. This molting process is crucial. They need their waterproof adult plumage before they can enter the ocean. Until then, they're trapped on the ice, dependent on their parents, and time is running out. Spring is coming to Antarctica. The sea ice is beginning to break up. The stable platform the colony has been living on is starting to fracture. The adults know this. They can sense the change. They need to get the chicks ready to swim before the ice disappears beneath them. The chicks that survived to this point, usually only about 50% of those that hatched, are now facing their final test. They need to make it to the ocean, learn to swim, learn to hunt, and do it all while avoiding leopard seals. Leopard seals are the apex predators of the Antarctic waters, and they know exactly when young penguins will be entering the ocean for the first time. They patrol the ice edges, waiting. For a young penguin on its first swim, the ocean is both salvation and death trap. The young penguins stand at the ice edge, hesitating. They've never been in water before. It's terrifying. But starvation behind them and instinct pushing them forward, they eventually jump. Some are taken by seals immediately. Others learn quickly, diving deep, using the swimming skills that are hardwired into their genetics. Those that survive this gauntlet will spend the next several years at sea, feeding, growing, maturing. They'll travel thousands of miles, diving to incredible depths, living a life completely different from their birth on the ice. And then when they reach sexual maturity at around 5 years old, something will call them back. They'll return to the ice, to the breeding grounds, to begin the cycle again. They'll make that same insane march inland. They'll endure the same brutal conditions their parents endured, because this is what emperor penguins do. This is their evolutionary strategy. It's extreme. It's brutal. But it works. 9:45:12:00, Segment 5. The Physical Marvels, the Biological Superpowers. Visual, underwater footage of penguins diving, interspersed with anatomical graphics. Audio. Let's talk about how emperor penguins are even capable of surviving these conditions, because their bodies are essentially masterpieces of evolutionary engineering, packed with adaptations that seem almost like science fiction. First, the feathers. Emperor penguins have about 100 feathers per square inch of skin. That's the highest feather density of any bird. These aren't ordinary feathers either. They're arranged in multiple layers, overlapping like roof shingles, creating an impenetrable barrier against wind and water. The outer layer is coated with oil from a gland near the tail, making them completely waterproof. Underneath the feathers is a thick layer of blubber, sometimes up to an inch thick. This fat serves multiple purposes. It's insulation, keeping their core body temperature stable even when the outside air is negative 70 degrees. It's also their fuel tank, the energy reserve they live off during those months-long fasts. Without this blubber layer, they'd freeze and starve simultaneously. Their circulatory system is a marvel of heat conservation. They have a countercurrent heat exchange system in their flippers and legs. Warm arterial blood flowing to the extremities passes right next to cold venous blood returning from the extremities. The heat transfers from the outgoing blood to the incoming blood, pre-warming it before it returns to the core. This means they can keep their flippers and feet just above freezing without losing precious body heat. In fact, their feet are specially adapted to withstand contact with ice. The tissue in their feet can function at temperatures that would cause frostbite in most animals. They can stand on ice for months without tissue damage. It's like they have built-in antifreeze. Now let's talk about their diving abilities, because this is where emperor penguins truly become superhuman. Or super penguin, rather. These birds regularly dive to depths of over 500 meters. That's over 1,600 feet. The deepest recorded dive was 564 meters. At those depths, the pressure is crushing, over 800 pounds per square inch. How do they survive this? Their bones are solid, not hollow like most birds. This makes them less buoyant, helping them dive deeper with less effort. Their lungs actually collapse under pressure, which sounds bad but actually prevents nitrogen from dissolving into their bloodstream and causing decompression sickness, the bends that human divers fear. They store oxygen not in their lungs but in their blood and muscles. Their blood has a higher concentration of hemoglobin than most birds, and their muscles are packed with myoglobin, a protein that binds oxygen. This allows them to hold their breath for over 20 minutes while diving and hunting. When they dive, their heart rate drops dramatically, sometimes to as low as 15 beats per minute. This bradycardia conserves oxygen, directing blood flow only to essential organs. Non-essential functions shut down. They become swimming torpedoes, focused entirely on the hunt. Their eyes are adapted for vision in low light and underwater. They can see clearly in the murky depths where they hunt. And they can adjust rapidly when they surface, transitioning from the darkness of deep water to the blinding brightness of ice and snow. Their swimming speed is impressive too. They can cruise at about 6 miles per hour and sprint at up to 12 miles per hour when escaping predators or chasing prey. Underwater, they're graceful, agile, nothing like the awkward waddlers they appear to be on land. The water is their true element. And here's something wild: they can drink salt water. Most animals can't do this. The salt concentration in seawater would dehydrate them. But emperor penguins have specialized glands above their eyes that filter out excess salt, which they then excrete through their nostrils. They're basically walking desalination plants. Their digestive system is equally impressive. They can consume huge quantities of fish in a single feeding session, storing it in their stomachs to bring back to chicks. The food doesn't spoil because their stomach acid is incredibly strong, preserving the fish until they return to the colony days or weeks later. Every single system in their body is optimized for survival in extreme conditions. They're not just tough. They're specifically engineered for a lifestyle that would kill almost any other animal on Earth. They're proof that evolution, given enough time and pressure, can create something that seems impossible. 1200-1330 Segment 6. The Intelligence and Social Complexity, the Hidden Minds. Visual: penguins interacting, calling, cooperating in huddles. Audio: here's something that often gets overlooked when people talk about emperor penguins. They're smart, really smart. The level of social cooperation and communication they display suggests cognitive abilities that we're only beginning to understand. The huddle rotation we talked about earlier isn't instinctive in the simple sense. It requires awareness of the group, understanding of fairness, and coordination. The penguins on the outside don't just randomly shuffle. They move with purpose, and the birds in the center make space for them. It's cooperative behavior that requires each individual to be aware of their role in the larger group. Studies have shown that emperor penguins can recognize individual calls among thousands of birds. That's not just memorization. That's acoustic processing and memory that rivals some of the most intelligent animals on Earth. They're picking out specific vocal signatures in an environment of constant noise, wind, and chaos. Parent-chick recognition is particularly impressive. After months at sea, a parent returns to a colony of thousands of chicks that have grown and changed since they left. Yet they can still identify their specific chick by voice alone. The chick, likewise, recognizes its parent's call and responds. This isn't random. It's learned, remembered, and executed under extreme stress. There's also evidence of social learning. Young penguins learn from watching adults. They learn when to enter the water by observing others. They learn diving techniques. They learn which areas are safer from predators. This cultural transmission of knowledge is a hallmark of intelligence. The decision-making involved in their survival is complex too. When to leave for the breeding grounds, when to abandon a chick if food is too scarce, when to dive deep versus shallow. These aren't automatic responses. They're choices based on environmental cues and individual condition. Some researchers believe emperor penguins may even have a form of empathy. There are documented cases of adults caring for orphan chicks that aren't their own, though this is rare. The fact that it happens at all suggests emotional complexity beyond simple instinct. They communicate with a variety of calls, each with different meanings. Contact calls, alarm calls, courtship calls, parent-chick recognition calls. They have a vocal vocabulary that allows for nuanced communication in a complex social environment. And perhaps most remarkably, they navigate with precision across featureless ice. How they find the same breeding grounds year after year, across a landscape that looks identical in every direction, is still not fully understood. They may use the sun's position, subtle variations in ice features, or even Earth's magnetic field. Whatever the mechanism, it requires sophisticated spatial memory and navigation skills. 1330-15-00, Segment 7, The Climate Crisis Reality, the Existential Threat. Visual shots of melting ice, shrinking colonies, struggling penguins. Audio. Now we need to talk about the elephant in the room, or rather the melting ice under the penguin. Emperor penguins are in trouble, serious trouble, and it's our fault. These birds evolved their extreme breeding strategy based on one critical assumption, that the sea ice would be stable and predictable. For thousands of years, it was. The ice formed at the same time each year, remained solid through the breeding season, and broke up on schedule in spring. Emperor penguins built their entire life cycle around this reliability. But that reliability is disappearing. Climate change is warming Antarctica faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. The sea ice is forming later, breaking up earlier, and becoming increasingly unpredictable. For a species that depends on stable ice for 4 to 5 months straight, this is catastrophic. In recent years, entire colonies have failed. Not just a few chicks dying, which is normal, but complete breeding failure. The ice breaks up before the chicks have grown their waterproof feathers. When chicks with fluffy down fall into the ocean, they drown. Thousands of chicks, an entire generation, lost in a single season. In 2016, the Halley Bay colony, the second largest emperor penguin colony in Antarctica, suffered complete breeding failure. The ice broke up too early. Every single chick died, and it's happened again in subsequent years. The colony, which once numbered over 25,000 breeding pairs, has essentially been abandoned. The penguins have tried to relocate, but suitable breeding sites are limited. The problem is accelerating. Climate models predict that if current warming trends continue, emperor penguins could lose over 80% of their population by the end of this century. Some models suggest they could be functionally extinct by 2100. We're talking about a species that has survived in Antarctica for potentially millions of years, wiped out in a few generations. And it's not just the ice. Warming oceans are changing the distribution of fish and krill, the penguins' primary food sources. The parents are having to travel farther to find food, which means longer trips, which means chicks waiting longer between meals. Starvation rates are increasing. There's also the issue of extreme weather events. Warming doesn't just mean less ice. It means more unpredictable storms, stronger winds, heavier snowfall. Chicks can be buried in snow. Adults can be separated from their eggs during particularly violent blizzards. The emperor penguin has been listed as near threatened by conservation organizations. Some groups are pushing for endangered status. The problem is that they live in one of the most remote places on Earth. We can't just build them shelters or create protected reserves in any meaningful way. Their habitat is the Antarctic ice, and that ice is disappearing. What can be done? The only real solution is addressing climate change itself, reducing carbon emissions, transitioning to renewable energy, international cooperation on environmental policy. These sound abstract, but for emperor penguins, they're literally life or death. Some scientists are monitoring colonies more closely, trying to understand which populations are most vulnerable and which might be more resilient. There's hope that some colonies, particularly those farther south where ice might remain more stable, could serve as refuges, but even this is uncertain. The tragedy is that emperor penguins did everything right from an evolutionary perspective. They found a niche, an extreme niche that no other animal could exploit. They developed incredible adaptations to survive there. They've been successful for millennia, but evolution can't keep pace with the speed of human-caused climate change. The ice is disappearing faster than they can adapt. Every emperor penguin chick that survives now is a small miracle. Every successful breeding season is a victory against increasing odds. These birds are fighting for survival against forces they can't understand and can't control. And whether they make it depends entirely on whether we, as a species, decide their survival is worth the changes we need to make. 15:00:16, Segment 8, The Cultural Impact, Why We Care. Visual, clips from documentaries, movies, cultural references to penguins. Audio, emperor penguins have captured human imagination in a way few other animals have. There's something about their story, their struggle, their dedication that resonates deeply with us. The documentary March of the Penguins brought their story to millions of people worldwide. It won an Academy Award. It made people cry over birds they'd never seen in person, living in a place most would never visit. Why? Because their story is fundamentally about sacrifice, dedication, and survival against impossible odds. These are themes that transcend species. We see ourselves in them. The devoted parents working together to raise their young, the father standing in the cold protecting his child, the mother traveling vast distances to bring food home. These are narratives we understand, values we admire. But there's also something humbling about emperor penguins. They make our own challenges seem smaller. We complain about cold weather while they're standing in -70 degrees for months. We think we're tired while they're fasting for 100 days. They put our own endurance into perspective. Children's movies have anthropomorphized them, given them voices and personalities. Happy Feet told a story of individuality and environmental awareness through dancing penguins. These cultural representations, while not scientifically accurate, have made people care about a species they might otherwise never think about. And that caring matters. Conservation requires public support. When people care about emperor penguins, they're more likely to support policies that protect them. They're more likely to make personal changes that reduce their carbon footprint. Cultural impact translates to real-world protection. Photographers and filmmakers risk their lives to document these birds. They spend months in Antarctica, enduring the same brutal conditions, to bring us images and footage that inspire awe. This documentation serves both artistic and scientific purposes, creating a visual record of a species at a critical moment in its history. Emperor penguins have become symbols of Antarctica itself, ambassadors for an entire ecosystem. When we talk about protecting the Antarctic, we're often really talking about protecting the penguins. They're the face of a cause, the emotional connection that makes abstract environmental issues feel personal and urgent. There's also something aspirational about them. They represent resilience, the ability to endure when endurance seems impossible. In a world that often feels overwhelming, where we face our own challenges and uncertainties, the emperor penguin's determination is inspiring. If they can survive their ordeal, maybe we can survive ours. 16:15:17, 00, outro and call to action. Visual, a single emperor penguin standing against the sunset, then a chick taking its first steps. Audio, the emperor penguin is nature's ultimate testament to the power of adaptation and the strength of parental devotion. They march into hell to bring new life into the world. They fast for months to protect a single egg. They dive to crushing depths to feed their young. They huddle together in the worst weather on Earth, cooperating to ensure the survival of the colony. But right now, as impressive as they are, they're losing a battle they can't fight alone. The ice is melting. Their world is changing faster than evolution can respond, and their fate is in our hands. So here's my question for you. What part of the emperor penguin's story hit you hardest? Was it the father's 2-month vigil in the darkness, the chick's desperate race to grow their feathers before the ice disappears? Or was it the reality that this incredible species might not survive the century? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, share it. Because the more people who understand what emperor penguins endure, what they represent, and what they're facing, the better chance we have of writing a different ending to their story. The emperor penguin is the resilient monarch of the icy realm. Let's make sure they get to keep their kingdom.